Okay, so today we're going to start talking about the Civil War. And before we get into the actual war, we need to talk about the plans of the strengths and the Confederacy and which states made that up and who were the key players within both the Union and the Confederate States of America. So, the election of 1860 is when President Lincoln is going to win. And with his victory, the South, specifically South Carolina, has had enough at this point, and they had threatened all along prior to Lincoln becoming president that if Lincoln did win the presidency, they would secede. Now, what is secession before we get into who seceded and when they did? Seceding means withdrawing from the Union. So on December 20th, 1860, South Carolina is going to be the first state to secede from the Union. That means they made a formal withdrawal from the United States of America and said they were going to become their own separate country from the United States. After South Carolina secedes, then we have multiple states, pardon me, multiple states that began to secede after that. And by February 1861, the Confederate States of America were formed. And this is going to be, from now on, known as the CSA, the Confederate States of America. Okay, so who were the Confederate States of America? Well, by the time the war had started and was in full force, there were 11 states that had formally withdrawn from the Union and joined the Confederate States of America. And they were in this order: South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Virginia, Louisiana, Texas, and Tennessee. By the time Tennessee had withdrawn, we had 11 states which formed the CSA, the Confederate States of America, as you can see on this map. The Union, or the USA, are going to be the dark blue states. Now you'll notice these smaller, or this lighter blue color right here are going to be what we call the border states. They did not side with one side or the other because most of the border states allowed slavery but did not want to withdraw from the Union, so they were kind of stuck in between on the issue. Okay, the four key players that you're going to need to remember were the two presidents for the U.S. and the Confederate States of America, and then the two main generals. Okay, the president for the United States at this time was Abraham Lincoln. He becomes the 16th president, and he is going to be president during the entire Civil War. The commander of the Union Army, who did not start as the commander of the entire Union Army, but by the end is going to be the main commander of the Union Army, is Ulysses S. Grant. He will later become president as well. Jefferson Davis is going to be the president of the Confederate States of America. And Robert E. Lee is going to be commander of the CSA Army. Now, these four men are going to be the key men that you need to remember for your exam, and who truly were the most impactful on the Civil War. Like I had said a few minutes ago, Ulysses S. Grant was not actually the first commander of the Union Army. He was actually a commander in the West, and his victories and the failures of so many Union generals before him is finally what pushed him into the spotlight when Abraham Lincoln said, "I've got to have Grant. He seems like he is fearless," and so he moved Grant out from the West and up to the main front of the war, which was in the East. Robert E. Lee was one of the best commanders of all time, and actually Abraham Lincoln had asked Robert E. Lee to be the commander for the Union Army, but Robert E. Lee was from Virginia, and when Virginia seceded from the Union, Robert E. Lee resigned his position in the U.S. Army and went back home, even though he did not believe in this separation. He didn't support it. He felt that it was his duty to side with his home state, which was Virginia. And so he left and became the commander of the CSA. Okay, so what were the strengths going into the war? Okay, the South had three main strengths. Number one, they had excellent military leadership. Okay, not only was Robert E. Lee well respected, he was very skilled as a military leader. He also had some very skilled leaders under him, like Stonewall Jackson. These men had been to West Point. They were full of knowledge on military strategies, and they were very brave. And as I had said earlier, Robert E. Lee was so great that Abraham Lincoln actually wanted him to lead the U.S. Army. The majority of the war is going to be fought in the South. Now, you might think, why is that a strength? Well, for the simple fact that the war is being fought in the South, Southerners know the land much better than Union leaders know the land. And so they're going to be at an advantage knowing the strategic areas where they need to set up their troops and wait for Union officers. Okay, number three, the soldiers were defending their home and beliefs. When soldiers are actually defending their home, their state, their beliefs, which were states' rights and slavery for the most part, they're going to be willing to fight harder and possibly more willing to sacrifice their life because they believe in their cause. Okay, the Northern strengths were number one, President Lincoln. President Lincoln proved to be an excellent president and was exactly what this country needed during the Civil War. Number two, the North had a much larger population. Okay, we all know that in war there are lives lost, and so simple math proves that if you have more bodies to put out on the battlefield, then you have a better chance of going the long distance and becoming victorious. So the Northern population was a huge advantage because both sides are going to have to go to a draft, and the Northern states have more bodies to draw from. And number three, 85% of the North has, or 85% of the factories are in the North. Okay, the Southern economy was based on agriculture. There were not a lot of factories. The Northern economy was based on manufacturing. So the majority of factories obviously are going to be in the North. When the war starts, the factories are able to produce goods that the soldiers need, including weapons and supplies. And the Southern states are not going to be able to produce those goods themselves, and they're not going to be able to get them from the North now, and so they're going to have to get them from Europe, which is going to be going to cost them a lot of time and money, which they don't have because they no longer use the U.S. currency. They're using a new currency. The Confederate States of America has their own currency. Number four, the North had double the railroad mileage. The South had not gotten around to building railroads because they were using the land for agriculture, while the North used tons of railroads to move goods to and from. When the war starts, they're going to be able to move goods quicker. They're going to be able to move men quicker using this railroad system, which is a big disadvantage for the South not to have railroad mileage. And number five, the North had almost all the naval power. Obviously, the North is going to have the larger Navy because the South is splitting off. The U.S. is going to retain the ships that they had prior to the Civil War. So they have much more naval power than and naval supplies than the South does. Okay, so what was the strategy? Well, the Southern strategy had three parts. Number one, they were going to do a what's called a defensive position. Jefferson Davis has said, all we ask is to be left alone. They really did not want to go to war. They wanted to be left alone and be allowed to form their own country, based on their philosophy of states' rights and be able to allow slavery. And the Union then is going to be the ones who are going to have to come in and bring the South back, because the South doesn't want to come back. It's the Union who wants the Southern states back. And so the South can kind of just sit and wait. The second strategy is going to be King Cotton. Southern cotton supplied the world. And the South has an agricultural economy, like I stated before, and the majority of their economy is based on cotton, and they were the leading suppliers for the entire world. And so what they felt like is, if we can use cotton as leverage, we will withhold cotton from Europe until Europe agrees to give us aid for the war. And so they said they hope to bring European aid in by withholding cotton. And that's a great strategy, except for the fact that the cotton supply, cotton crop had been so good in the previous few years that Europe had bought a surplus of cotton, and they actually didn't need cotton right away. And so when the South withheld it, Europe said, we are not getting involved in your civil war. We have enough cotton stored up. We don't need it right now, so y'all go ahead and do your thing, and we'll stay out of it. So that was actually something that never happened. And if Europe had come to aid the Confederate Army, the outcome of the war may have been completely different. Number 3, the Confederate States hoped to have big victories in the North because they wanted to weaken the morale. The Southern states were fighting for a purpose, their belief in states' rights and in the use of slavery. The North was fighting to bring the South back. Yes, there were some moral reasons and so forth, but primarily the North just wanted to get the South back. And so the Southern generals and political leaders said, we need to have a couple large victories in the North, and by doing this, it's going to withdraw, or they hoped it would withdraw the support of the people in the North to continue fighting, and the North would have to sign a treaty and leave the South alone. Okay, the Union strategy. The Union strategy is going to be called the Anaconda Plan. Okay, and what the Anaconda Plan did was it was an offensive two-part strategy. The first part was going to be a naval blockade on the southern coastline. A blockade is when armed forces prevent the transportation of goods or people into or out of an area. So the North was going to send their Navy ships all down along the coast of the South, blocking them from getting any supplies from Europe or selling any cotton. So they weren't going to be able to get any goods in or out, and they thought, well, that's going to cripple their economy, and that's going to keep Europe from providing aid for them. The second part is going to be that the Union would gain control of the Mississippi River, thus splitting the Confederacy in two. Here's a picture of the Anaconda Plan. So they are going to block off the coast, and then they're going to come up the Mississippi River and block Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas off from the rest. And Texas is valuable at this point because they've got Galveston, which is a port city. So Texas had been able to get goods in and out that some of the other states had not been able to, and then supply them to other southern states. And so just like an anaconda, a large snake, this large snake kills people by squeezing the life out of them and suffocating them. And that's what they wanted to do with this Anaconda Plan. Slowly surround the South and squeeze the life out of them until they had no other choice but to admit defeat and come back into the United States.